To lead us in our final comment this afternoon, I want to invite a very old aviator whose name is unpronounceable to come up here to the stage and tell us the story about the fly and Sister Mary, Holy Ghost. Chuck Slusarczyk, ladies and gentlemen. You want me to set the stage with that? Okay, fine. All of you know that Chuck, John Moody, Homer Kolb were the first inductees at the EAA's Ultralight Hall of Fame. This year it was Boris Popov from BRS, very deservedly so, and Wayne Eisen. At EAA, at headquarters, how many people have been to the museum? You know the Eagle Hangar. They move everything out of the Eagle Hangar. It is set up, tables, linens, absolutely as you expect from our organization, the finest kind of setting. It is very staid and stoic, and everything is extremely polite. Everybody wears suit and tie. The women's, many of them wearing gowns. Have I set the stage? Tom Poberezny opens it with a very flowery speech. We introduce the Home Builder Award. This year, that last year we were honored, and I think it happened again this year, the Ultralight Holland inductees follow the home builders, then the Warbirds and all those guys. So I think that puts us in a rather unique position. To make it happen a little bit faster, I was very honored because Homer, Chuck, and John were my heroes when I got started, guys. And I was honored to present them. And I brought up John Moody in front of this august assembly. And John was doing pretty darn good. Until he got to the point to where he started talking about why he went to EAA instead of flying and hanging out with a bunch of long-haired, dope-smoking, pot-chewing, pressed ham on the back of the van window hippie hang glider pilots. Okay? Right then, I got a little nervous. Tom Poberezny's pacing up and down, and he's looking at me. And I'm going, whoa, I think I just stepped in it kind of big. And the young woman who was running the show looked at me, and she's going, make them hurry up. Okay, so I give John the high sign. Well, by this time, John's already got half the audience going. The other half are sitting there going, who are these ultralight guys? Is this a representative? Quite a quandary. I turned at her. She said, they've earned it. Let them enjoy it. Meanwhile, Tom Poberezny's in the back of the room pacing back and forth like a madman. Okay, fine. John gets done. Nice, very polite round of applause. Bring up Homer Kolb. How many of you guys in here know Homer? If you've been in the sport any time, you know him. He's a gentleman. And his acceptance speech was perfection. Gentlemanly. Very nicely done. Then I had the unusual opportunity of having to present probably one of the most noteworthy characters, and I mean that sincerely, people in our existence. And I bring Chuck up to the stand, and he's standing there, and I thought he was going to start crying. Finally, he turns to me, and he says, Frank, I got to tell him the joke. I got to tell him the joke. I turned him loose. Kermit Weeks. Know his name from EA magazines, runs a beautiful museum down in Florida. On the floor, rolling in tears. Ladies with their gowns and everything else, stuffing napkins in their eyes because they're crying so much. At this time, let me give you the guy that brought the house down at EAA, Chuck Slusarczyk.
Whoa! Wow. How do you beat an intro like that? Except for me to say that the good doctor really took a calculated risk coming here in front of this group, I can tell you that. My hat's off to her bravery. It was, yeah, I guess Frank was really right, because I got up in front of this group, and the ceremony was wonderful. I was feeling very privileged and honored to be in the first group of 3 initial inductees to the Hall of Fame. And when they first announced it, I did lose my composure slightly at Oshkosh during the air show. And I says, I'm not going to let, the people that were there that saw it, they had their treat for the fact there was somebody that was here that saw, yeah. They all said, boy, we didn't know there was that side of you. Well, you saw it. So I was afraid that when I got up there and I was going to start doing my speech, the same thing was going to happen. I was going to start slobbering. And I looked over at Frank, and I says, Frank, can I tell my fly story? Frank looked at me, and he looked at the girl, and the girl says, hey, it's their day. Frank looked at me and says, Chuck, you're a wild man. And I proceeded to tell the story about the fly. I don't know, probably most of you have heard it. I don't know who hasn't heard it by. Well, you have now. Okay, we have about half and half there. Okay, basically what it is I was born in a poor Polish ghetto many, many years ago. And being that I lived in a poor Polish ghetto, we were poor and didn't have toys. I mean, the other kids, the rich kids had a wagon wheel to roll around, or they had an inner tube or something. We didn't have that. But our neighborhood had a lot of dogs. And if you have dogs, you have a lot of dog doo-doo. And when you have dog doo-doo, you get a lot of green bottle flies. And there's some, I mean, just potential horsepower all over the place. But just had something to do with them. So what we did was to capture the flies. Now, there's a technique for catching flies. You just don't walk up and pick up a fly and do something with them. You just take the fly after you catch them first. Now, here's the technique for catching it. Now, you walk through the yards, and you find a nice pile with flies, dark green, with green bottleneck flies on it. And you slowly creep up, hand raised. And as you stalk the flies, you get closer, 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 and in one fell swoop, you get as close as you can, and when the flies jump off, you'll grab a whole handful. Now, you must be very, very careful that you don't dig too deep, because you could get more than you bargained for. And your mom sure won't like that, I can tell you that. Now you've got a handful of flies. What do you do with them? You put them in a matchbox, baby food jar, any kind of container. Get them in there, close it up, put them in the ice box. Now they're cooling down. Now while these flies are cooling down, you go to your model airplane room and you get some tissue paper and you cut it into little teeny weeny squares. And you fold it in half and you cut out a little teeny weeny airplane. Then you go to your mother's nylons and you steal one little nylon thread out of her nylons. Then you take your model airplane glue and you take a little teeny weeny drop of glue, then the little teeny weeny thread, and you stick it on there like that. And you make about 10 or 12 of them. And then you go into the ice box and you get the flies. Now you got to let them sit for a while because they got to cool down. Now you get the fly out of the box, you put him on a table, and he's kind of. Now you take a little teeny weeny drop of glue, and you stick it right on his keister like that, and then you blow on it to dry the glue. Now while the glue's drying, he's warming up from your breath. Off he goes, towing his little airplane behind him. So one summer, Chester Vanek and I caught about 100 flies. And we spent the whole week building little fly airplanes and had flies all in the matchboxes. And we put little swastikas on half of them. And we put little American stars on the other half of the airplanes. And we waited for my mother to go home or go to the market. So we had the house to ourselves. Now our old houses had 8 or 9 foot ceilings. So we had a lot of airspace. My mother takes off. Chester and I get together. We flip a coin. I was the Americans. He was the Nazis. We launch all the flies. And with all the appropriate sound, all these flies are buzzing around. If they tangle up, that's a kill. And then when they hit the ground, you smush it. And then you keep doing this until there's one fly left. Then you see if he's a star or a swastika, and that's who won the battle. So here we thought my mother was going to be gone a long time, and here I was right in the middle of shushing them off the ceiling with the broom, and my mother walks in. No sense of humor sometimes. She was just trying to figure out what in the world are we doing while she's out of the house. You know, we got screens on the house, and she's yelling at me in Polish about, I put screens to keep the flies out, and you bring them in, da-da-da. My nylons was the next one. I never knew that when you pull the thread out, it went down. It didn't go around, you know. They don't make them like they do now, but that was the old stuff. I think they call them runners, and that's what I turned into, a runner, because she was after me with the broom. I thought, holy smokes. So then finally school was getting close to starting to school, and one of the best things in life that could ever happen to a fly builder happened. I found a horsefly. Now when you live in Cleveland, there's not many horses, and that was like finding a 500 horsepower engine. I mean, we're talking. And I caught this horsefly. I gave it the swoop, and then hanging on him. I finally worked him into the box. And I got him into the icebox. And I thought, man, this sucker can handle a big airplane, so I made me a big one. And I'm gluing it up, and I let him in there for about 8 hours, which was generally long enough to keep a fly cool down. I opened the box, and boy, he was mad. I mean, you ain't seen nothing until you seen a mad horsefly. 3 days later, I got him calmed down to where I could work with him. It was really experience. So I glued the airplane on his tail, put him back in the box, and I took him to school. Because it was opening day of school. I had to have something to show for show and tell. And I don't know how many of you guys ever went to parochial school, Catholic school with Polish nuns. But I say no more, say no more. But you got to know that there'll be 45 kids in the classroom, and it's dead quiet. Not a peep in the class. Well, Sister Mary, holy smoke, turns her back. She starts writing something on the blackboard, and that's when I decide to launch. The nun stops, turns around, looks right at me. I mean, how does she... I think it was one of the girls had to be standing there. No, they always did this. Like you didn't know. They were squealing on you. So Sister Mary, holy smoke, points to the cloakroom. I promptly follow in the cloakroom. She's getting ready with the handbrush to instruct me on a few things. And I'm asking her, Sister, what did I do wrong? I thought she was going to holler at me because I launched a fly in the class. But no, she said that I'm going to write penance after I get swatted 100 times that I will not torture God's creatures. But I said, Sister, I wasn't torturing them. I was playing with them. She says, Charles, you were torturing God's creatures. I said, how? She says, when you glued his keister shut, he couldn't perform his bodily functions. And that's how you were torturing them. Well, you know what? At that point, I realized why after about 2 or 3 days they would lose power. And it's kind of... So... It really, she didn't realize how much good she did for me in my horsepower race that we had. So it was a good sensation to have Sister Mary Holy Smoke so impressed with my engineering and aeronautical skills. I think I'm getting the bum's rush. But Frank, I didn't even tell him about, Chuck, my wing broke off when I hit the fence part.
No, absolutely not.
All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.